fire.
Turn a spark to a fire. Horizontal with Lila. Horizontal with Lila. Horizontal with Lila. Horizontal with Lila. I am Lila, and I am horizontal in Ubud, Bali, Indonesia.
And I'm Ari.
And I'm Jamin.
And we're horizontal with Lila.
Yes. Perfection. And one more time. Hello, horizontal lovers. Horizontal with Lila is slow radio, consensual eavesdropping, intimacies of all kinds. It's us lying down right next to each other, wearing robes, sharing secrets in your ears. Welcome in and welcome back. It's been a few months since my last episode. This winter, I got mired in a boggy swamp of depression, stared at the ceiling for a while, binge-watched a lot of dystopian TV, and then journeyed to Bali, Indonesia to get my juju back. It's back. And I suppose I live in Bali now. For now. I've missed you. I've missed this. It's a whole new world out there. And yet, I am more than ever convinced that we need to make private conversations public. I am more than ever convinced that interdependence is the word of the century. I am more than ever convinced that intimacy is the way. Connection is my wheelhouse. And so, I renew my vows to dispel shame, combat loneliness, and alchemize human connection. Most of us are treading water. We might be back with families we haven't lived with since we were 17, or spending 24/7 with children we've never cared for full time, or quarantined with our romantic partner, absent any of our usual letting off steam rituals like work or the gym or matcha with friends or anything, literally anything, besides constant togetherness. Humans probably haven't related this much since agriculture was invented, but probably not even then. They had different tasks on the farm then. Homo sapiens probably haven't related this much since cave-dwelling times, but perhaps not even then. Somebody had to hunt or forage. Somebody left the dwelling place for hours at a time. Compressed in our domiciles by the undeniable force and magnitude of this virus, we might very well be relating more as a species than at any time in human history. And if we are quarantining alone, we might be lonelier than ever before in our lives. Much of our relating has gone virtual. We have less kinesthetic and energetic cues, as a large part of our intimacy is mediated by electronic boxes. We need stronger communication skills than ever before. We need a bigger toolbox. At last, I have something to offer the world that the world at large might finally recognize it needs. During seasons 1 and 2, I got horizontal with one guest at a time. In season 3, I've had mostly threesomes, myself plus 2 guests who are in some kind of relationship with one another. Typically, each recording is between 2 and 3 hours long and divided into 2 parts. The part 1s are available in all the podcast places for all the podcast people, and the part 2s are available exclusively for my patrons. This conversation was recorded over the course of 5-ish hours. I'll divide this conversation into 4 parts. The first 2, episodes 104 and 105, will be available in all the podcast places, and the last 2, episodes 106 and 107, will be exclusive to patrons of the Horizontal Arts. To become a patron and for access to the full Horizontal, including all the part 2s, or in this case, 3s and 4s, go to patreon.com/horizontalwithlila. Patreon is spelled patreon.com. And you can find me there only by navigating directly to patreon.com/horizontalwithlila. This is my livelihood for the foreseeable future. So, to all of my current and future patrons, thank you for my subsistence. And thank you for making the world a more intimate place. In this and the following 3 episodes, I lie down with Ari Cardos and Jamin Patel, world travelers, longtime digital nomads, co-parents of 2 young children, and American expats in Bali. Friends of Morel, my housemate and guest of episode 1, Feed Your Delight, Ari and Jay offered me one of their guest rooms in Ubud. I stayed in their home my first 2 weeks in Bali. Jamin told me that in their years of travel, they'd been hosted by legions of people, so they're paying it forward now. It was a soft place to land. I'm grateful for the lily pad. Ari is a relationship coach for busy professionals in both traditional and alternative relationships, and the author of the book Relationship Agreements, a simple and effective guide for strengthening communication, reducing conflict, and increasing intimacy to design your ideal relationship. Her new program, Beyond Mom Mode, intends to nourish the nurturer. Jamin is a serial entrepreneur, serial author, public speaker, and creator of The Integrated Father. His new venture endeavors to guide men as they design a version of fatherhood that nourishes them, their relationships, their kids, their work, and their creativity. Many of the parenting skills that Ari and Jay mention in our conversation are not just parenting skills, but parenting ourselves skills, humaning skills, and relating skills. In this, part 1 of our conversation, we told our comic book style origin stories. Jamin's story, let's call it The Young Prince, or Jamin and the Quest for Authenticity, involves a strict Indian family, sisters and aunties aplenty, bicultural identity, being a model Hindu and a very, very, very good boy, doing right by his parents, musical theater, people-pleaser recovery, embracing his weird, Adlerian psyche, and positive discipline. Ari's story, let's call it Ode to a Puerto Rican Massage, or Sunshine-like Sex, involves Polish Roman Catholic and Swedish Lutheran parents, 3 siblings, constant uprootings, dance, 5 baptisms, maybe 6, a vacation Bible school, being a very, very, very good girl, backpacking across the world, youth hostel life, sex addiction worries and Christian counseling, 1 stellar sugar daddy, Seattle and sex positivity, her longtime open relating partner Adam, and creating agile relationship agreements. Come lie down with us in Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. So, as a big fantasy fan, and I really love comic book movies, my ritual with my dad is that we go see a fantasy or a comic book movie and we go to the Chinese food buffet. So it's kind of been my jam for a really long time. In comic books, they have an origin story that, lets us know how superhero X gained superpower Y. And I was hoping you could tell me a bit of your life story in the form of an origin story. So how Ari came to possess her relationship agreement superpowers, how Jay came to possess his superfathering.
Oh,
I can do a little one if you want, and you can think. So, once upon a time in Brazil, there was a psychology conference, and an Italian-American guy from Brooklyn spotted a beautiful young Brazilian social worker across the room and attempted to have a conversation with her. They didn't want children, but they became my parents because my mother at 35, I think my dad came into her bedroom and she was talking to a houseplant, and he said, aha, maternal instinct repressed. And then they started trying to have a child, and they tried for 5 years. And my mother was 41. And then they had me. So I was the miracle baby.
Wow.
And then I always wanted a brother. But my mother had a miscarriage. She couldn't have another child after that. And so my very wise babysitter said, give her a cat. And I never once again asked for a brother. So little Lila grows up with a fascination about human relationships due to this psychology and social work perspective in her house. Her parents are unhappy. They fight in the living room. Her mother gets colon cancer when she's 7, 8, and 9. She's in the hospital. And she survives. And then she divorces. She goes into remission, and she divorces Lila's father when Lila is 12. So I'm 12 years old. They say you can choose who you want to live with.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And then a couple days later, they come back and they say, you can't choose who you want to live with. You're going with your mom.
Oh my gosh.
Agency, no agency, And so I moved with my mother to Florida. I just loved boys so much and had, my dad was loving but very far. So I would forget that I even had a father. So I would chase after male attention, but it wasn't necessarily easy to come by. And I became a theater artist and went to an arts high school. And so I always had a creative outlet. 17, I get the fuck out of my mother's house because we have this really fraught relationship. Although I'm very grateful to her because she taught small me that sex is not dirty, that it's something that happens between people who love each other. It's something to be appreciated and celebrated. And so I had a sex-positive mother before sex positivity was a term that people knew. So I feel incredibly lucky. And she said in high school, I hope you won't have sex while you're in high school. I hope you won't. But if you want to, please tell me, and I will take you, and we will get condoms, and we will get you birth control. And I didn't because I had all this permission. So I felt like the permission precluded the transgression. It wasn't taboo. It wasn't illicit. And so it wasn't exciting in that way. I didn't feel the need to rebel through sex. So I didn't lose my virginity. I don't want to use that term anymore. So I didn't have my sexual debut until I was 19.
I like that term.
Yeah, me too. And it was not pleasurable per se, but it was my choice. I wanted to do that at that time. For a while, I felt like I couldn't give it away. And that, began a huge fascination with how sex interplayed in personal relationships. The first time anybody went down on me, I thought this is the best thing in the world. Like, this is the best thing that has ever been invented in the history of time. This is amazing. And that initial delight and fascination led to my sort of book club of one happening in my late 20s, reading Arousal, The Secret Logic of Sexual Fantasies, Sex at Dawn, Mating in Captivity, going to a sex party and working as a body worker so that I could observe and have a role, but not feel like I was needing to participate sexually. And thus began some voyeur inclinations and essentially an observer and sort of I'm adjacent. I'm like poly adjacent. I'm kink adjacent. I'm like like right on the edge of the community, observing and asking questions and indulging my curiosity.
So good.
I've had a little bit more time to think about it.
Jamin, do you want to tell your story first?
Yeah, I can tell my story. So Jamin was born the third of 3 children. I have 2 older sisters, and my parents really wanted a boy. So they tried again, and they got me. And
So they're thrilled.
yeah, so I'm like the young prince of my family. I was born in Chicago. Both my parents were born and raised in Africa, and my family's from India. So my dad was born and raised in Uganda, and my mom was born and raised in Tanzania. Then they went back to India for the end of high school and college. Then they had an arranged marriage. They set out to the U.S.
Whoa. We gotta go back a second.
Yeah.
So how did they come to grow up in Uganda and Tanzania?
Oh, because my grandparents were also world traveling entrepreneurs like me, so my family.
What?
And they left India to go to Uganda to create trading posts to bring goods from the British Commonwealth to all of the villages in Africa. And they literally created towns. Like my grandparents created the theater and the school, and they bought movies to town. Like they literally built the town that my family grew up in.
What is it?
It's called Masaka. So it's the major city in Uganda is Kampala.
Yeah.
And then if you go 3 hours west, there's a city called Masaka. Yeah. And so
Wow.
I just took my parents to their birthplace around 4 years ago, and they still have a huge building that's called the Patel Samaj. This is built for Patels because they brought so many people there. And I got to see this. The school that they went to wasn't the one that my grandparents built, but the movie theater that they built was there. I never met either of my grandfathers. They died very young, before I was born. My paternal grandfather died when my dad was 16, and my maternal grandfather died when my mom, I believe, was in 5th grade, or maybe a few years after that. I can't remember exactly. So I never met them, but they were very we're gonna go move to the Commonwealth. There's an opportunity in India, so we're gonna go to Africa. And then my parents were like, okay, we're gonna go to America, and then here I am in Bali. So it's not really a surprise. This is the way my family has just operated. We're entrepreneurial. Every generation has started their own business, and it's usually in a different country. So it's not very common that we work for somebody else or that we stay where we are. We're always what else is out there? Let's go explore and make the most of it. That's very much my family tradition.
What did your parents create?
I don't know if you've ever heard of the saying hotel, motel, patel. So they are hoteliers, and they own hotels and motels in Pennsylvania.
Hotel, motel, Patel?
Yeah, most 60% of every hotel or motel that you stayed in is owned by a Patel. I would say 80% are owned by Indians, and 60% of those are Patels.
In the United States?
In the United States, yeah. It's very, very common. Days Inn, Comfort Inn,
Whoa!
Ramada, Marriott, any chain. They're just, yeah. There's even a huge organization called the Asian American Hotel Owners Association, and they literally own I believe 60 to 80% of the hotel motels that are in the U.S.
So did you and your sisters grow up in and out of hotels?
Yeah, totally. Our house was attached to one. Is a motel.
In Pennsylvania?
In Pennsylvania.
And then was there anyone after you? Or they had the young prince and they're like, we're done?
No. They were done after me, yeah. I fulfilled all their wishes.
How did your sisters feel about that?
They're like my moms, I think they knew. They know I was a favorite. Also being the only boy, I got way more freedoms than they got as women, right? From that generation. So I got to travel everywhere, whereas they didn't. So, I owe them a lot because they bared the brunt of a lot of shifting culturally that happened with immigrant families. And then I was younger, came 6 years after my oldest sister. And so by then, things had shifted. They had tested a lot. And then also being the boy, I had, they were much more used to American culture. And I was able to, I didn't listen to American music till 1990. or 1993 actually.
And when were you born?
83. So I was 10 years old. And that, like, until then, it was only Indian cinema, Indian music, Bollywood music. Like, that's all we'd listen to. We weren't allowed to listen to radio. We didn't watch a lot of American television, So when I was 10 is when it really started shifting. So imagine my sister was 16 at that point without having a lot of access to American media.
So when you say that they bore the brunt of it, do you mean that they bore the brunt of holding down the Indian culture in America?
Well, yeah, I would say the brunt was more of like the limit on assimilation into American culture.
Because I was wondering if it was the opposite, like assimilating so well that, because there are some families that are like that, it's like, let's not even speak our language.
Oh, yeah, no, we're the opposite. It was a hunker down. In fact, for the diaspora of that age, everyone who went to the UK or the US, they went to those places and they hunkered down on the culture so much so that in India, actually, Indians in India progress at a more natural rate of modernization and
with the rest of the world,
or whatever you might want, Westernism, if you want to call it. Whereas Indians in the US and in the UK, well, the UK is a little bit of a different story, but in the US, it took a much longer time because we were very much hunkered down on we must, our identity is our culture. So we must hold on to it steadfastly amongst, anything else. And so every Indian you might meet who's of my generation grew up very much in this am I American? Am I Indian? It's hard to be both. It's hard to assimilate. So yeah, so it was even tougher for my sisters. And then by the time, I actually had sleepovers when I was in high school, which was a big deal. You're gonna go over to some American family house and sleep there, whoa,
Yeah.
So it was, and we didn't go out every weekend. We also had a family business. We'd always stay home. So my upbringing was very I don't want to say it was more contained, it was very contained. Insular, family oriented, but the family business was always an excuse to hang out. My friends would go out. I'd be like, Mom and Dad, can I go out this weekend? They're like, didn't you go out last weekend? Why don't you stay at home with us and just be with the family, which meant, watching Indian media from satellite and helping with the business as needed.
So you felt very much a part of the tribe.
Yeah, not I really necessarily wanted to, but we didn't have freedom to rebel, if that made sense. So my parents were very, well, my mom especially was a little bit more authoritarian. So she's just my house, my rules, you do all this stuff. So, and then also I was kind of the model, I was just a model child. So literally family members named their children after me. I was put on a pedestal my whole life of just being I knew all the Sanskrit shlokas and prayers. And I knew the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. I could tell the entire story with detail, the Gita. I mean, I was in Sunday school.
Wow.
I mean, I was just super duper
Model Hindu.
Model Hindu. Yeah, exactly. I was look at this guy in America being so Indian. I was me and my sisters, but me specifically were the models of all of those things,
Yeah.
And so I could handle all social situations, navigate all the adult humor with all the uncles and with all the aunts who came over. I knew to go do the dishes as soon as food was done. I knew to clean the table. I was just very much this.
So little Jamin is just so good. He's just
so
such
good.
a good boy.
Super good boy, put on a pedestal, yeah.
And when does little Jamin rebel?
Yeah, so it actually took a long time for me to rebel. And then there were parts of me that wanted to rebel in different ways. But really my belief for a long time was that I was the projection of my parents on this planet. And my role in my life was to do good by them, and to fulfill their dreams that they had for me, and to be a model child, and to get them, validation that they're doing a good job raising me. Because in Indian culture, whatever a child does, it's an immediate reflection on the parent. And so societally, there's a lot of pressure also. And this is common across all Indian families for the majority. Some of them kind of were fuck this and, went their own way with it. But, all my cousins, we all had this growing up.
Is there also wanting to make your parents' sacrifices worth it? Because I know a lot of first generation folk talk about that.
Yeah, there's that aspect of they just worked really, really hard. And their motivation was that they didn't know better. They're in a new country. They worked hard. They didn't really go get advanced degrees and things like that. They wanted that for us. They wanted more education. They invested in private education for me in high school. They just wanted me to achieve a lot, and they wanted me to have a different life than they did. And that was really important to them.
So being a hotelier, it was not an achievement. If you had done that, that would have fallen short of your parents' hopes and expectations for you.
Yes and no. I think, do we have a joke that when you're a kid, you can either grow up to be a doctor, a lawyer, or those are the main two. And then engineer is just a very natural fit for Indians because we study a lot. It's just a cultural thing, I guess, Asians. And so, when I was young, they're just you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer because those two things make a lot of money and they're very well respected jobs that you can have. So which one are you going to be? That was for a long time. It was just which one? And then as I grew up, I chose engineering and then I went into business and I did, management consulting and made a lot of money doing that. So it was very different. But I was very much for me, the origin story of Jamin is just the real desire to be authentic. I was put on the pedestal to the level that people were naming their child after me, telling my parents, what a good job they did with me. They want their child to be like me. I mean, it was a lot of pressure. And I had to kind of maintain this. It is a natural part of me because I could do it easily and it was fun.
You wanted to please, though.
But it was all validation-seeking behavior. I was a complete people pleaser. So I'm a recovering people pleaser. And my true desire, and even my TED Talk, I just talk about this aspect of go out there and be weird, be authentic, be who you are, And that is kind of most meaningful thing for me is allowing that authenticity, which is why I'm so in love with Ari, because she can hold my pure authenticity in a way that is just the most unconditional love I've ever felt in my life. And that's led me to what I'm doing now, because what I realized is that I care about how children experience their childhood and to what extent they can be in touch with their emotions, feel secure in themselves, and truly be happy. And the way that society is set up right now, the tools that parents have, there aren't really many that if parents go to seek help, the truth is most parents or most people, their parents or caregivers didn't model kind of the best examples of being in a relationship for them or parenting for them. And now we live in a world where we have research and Google and, books and all this stuff. But there's also this level of shame because people say parenting should be intuitive. And I don't believe that. I think
people say that about sex too.
Yeah, it's like taking
But come on.
Yeah. So you can take care of a young human and feed them and bathe them and make sure they're healthy. That's intuitive, how to take care, but how to create secure attachment, how to create self-confidence, how to be emotionally strong and aware. Those things actually, there are tools that exist that parents don't have. So everything that I'm doing with the integrated father is combining my years with men's work, which has helped me be more authentic. And I'm combining that with everything I've learned about relationships from Ari and combining it with all the conscious parenting tools that we use, just so men can actually be more authentic and heal through the stuff that they're carrying from their childhood and that whole generation of how masculinity was treated. And then also be in a place where the relationships can have different meaning than what we see on TV because it doesn't work that way all the time. And then have the tools to create a different experience with their children. So that's kind of what is the most important thing for me to be doing on the planet.
I have an unpopular kind of authoritarian opinion about parenting, which is that I wish everybody had to pass a test.
Oh my God.
In order to become a parent, you would have to prove that you had emotional intelligence, that you could resolve conflict. That
When I started learning about some of these tools, especially ones that Ari would introduce me to, I learned about Adlerian psychology and I was just in positive discipline. I was just how can anyone be a parent without knowing this? How was I allowed to become a parent without knowing this? Thank God I know it now.
I don't know what either of those things are. Tell me.
So, yeah. And Ari, jump in at any point here because she's really like the master of these. But Adlerian psychology, I believe Dr. Joseph Adler, his first name may not be Joseph, but I'm pretty sure. But it's
Dr. Adler.
Dr. Adler.
Dr. Adler.
So it's Adlerian psychology. And it just goes to this notion, especially in an age where like children were allowed to work at like age 12 or 14, right? Like in mines. Like at that time, he was like, no, actually, I think children maybe shouldn't be doing that. And they should be like playing. And generally, I feel that children and more generally all adults actually have a desire and a longing for two specific things, which is significance and belonging. And everything that a child does is a expression for getting that.
Bid
And
for those
exactly.
things.
So if your child is acting out, you shouldn't discipline them. You should find out why they're calling for attention that they're not getting. And maybe we should actually spend time with our kids. Maybe we should, engage them and love them and let them feel significant and let them feel that they belong and give them some agency. And by doing that, they won't make these calls for attention, which means that we won't need to discipline. And discipline is like the hallmark of parenting from the last generation. Like, how well disciplined are your kids? Wow, they're such a good boy, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And this judgment is placed on it. So positive discipline is really around shifting from that. And so now if I'm in a place where we have guests over and I'm making dinner and the kids are going, berserkos and like yelling and want my attention, instead of being like, hey, can you keep it down? Right? Or worse, will you shut up or anything like that? Instead, I'll get down to their eye level and say, hey, do you need a hug right now?
What do you need?
Yeah. And then I'll just love them. I'll just take 2 minutes and I'll tell my guests to wait. I'll turn on the heat on the stovetop. I'll just get down to the level and be like, hey, what do you need? Do you want a hug? Can I hold you? Do you want, and I'll lift them up and I'll cook again while holding them and I'll listen to what they have to say and my guests will just wait for a moment because adults can wait. And then once they feel full, they'll go run off for the next hour and not bother me, right? And then I can engage in adult conversation again. So it's really about balancing those things. And so positive discipline is all around like not needing to use like discipline in terms of negative reinforcements, but also giving children the feeling of significance and belonging, giving them agency instead of telling them don't do something, which A, doesn't make sense to a child, is telling them what they can do. So if you tell someone don't climb, they have to imagine themselves climbing and then imagine themselves not
With an X across it.
Like not doing that, which can be a million things. So instead, you use you can statements. So you can put your feet on the ground. So they can see in their mind what it means to put their feet on the ground, realize their feet are on a couch or whatever they're climbing, and then they can do the thing, right? And so you're telling them that you can put your feet on the ground. And that's a way to kind of let them like not always be telling them no or don't do this or don't do that. I mean, I heard somewhere like before a child is like 5, they hear no like 1,000 times.
Wow.
And so it's just really around working with the psychology of children and then parenting in a way that fits that. And it's just a simple shift that took me just 4 or 5 minutes to explain, but most parents walk around without this knowledge.
Oh, that's so much rejection before the age of 5, right?
Yeah.
No, can't, stop, don't.
Yeah.
You're not allowed. When I teach yoga, I often double up on the tighter side of things, which is a technique I got from this teacher, Chris Acosta, who's been teaching in St. Petersburg, Florida for 30 plus years. And I say, which side is tighter? And if you can't figure it out, try it again, feel into it. And we're going to double up on the tighter side. Most people have learned to call their tighter side their bad side. And I have been trying to shift away from that, right? So I say, I don't have any siblings myself, but I am told that they have the same genetics, but they are different. And that they might need to be treated differently. And so I think of the sides of our body as siblings. And the one that's tighter is like what used to be called the problem child that needs your attention, needs more love from you, needs more care from you. So I use that analogy in yoga all the time. I love to hear you saying that this is a method.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then one more question about Jamin's origin story, and that is the origin of Jamin's weird. And how is Jamin weird, and when is the first noticing of weird, and how does weird unfurl?
Yeah, that's super interesting. For me, the weird was kind of like rebellious digression, So I was so perfect all the time that when I could just be weird and do something that like made no sense or that I thought was completely goofy, that I knew wouldn't give me accolades, it would be really fun. So, oh my God, I barely did anything in high school. I'm just trying to think of like the earliest type of thing that I would do.
College, maybe?
Yeah, I think probably college. Well, it was just funny because there's always this balance, but I think it was more like I remember one big outlet for me in high school was musical theater. So my mom was like, stop all this, she'd call it natak, and it's kind of like it's acting, but like foolery,
This like schmacting?
Yeah, schmacting. She's like, stop all this acting, schmacting. And
natak?
Natak. Yeah, exactly. And so she'd be like, stop all this natak and just focus on achievement and your grades. And I'm like, Mom, I'm already salutatorian of my class. I'm already citizenship award winner. I'm already like, best improved, cross country guy. I'm like, I'm going to do this other thing. And so that was kind of like a point of contention that we would have where she like didn't really support me going to theater practice all the time. But I loved to do it because I was singing and I was dancing and I was on stage and it was goofy, and you have theater kids, and they're all weird.
I do know because I am one.
And so I think it was just like the conversations I had with them. It was just like, wow, like I don't have to be this perfect projected person. I can just be weird and we can sing songs to each other and we can like dance or we can talk about whatever weird stuff. And I think it just felt really fun to like be in that crew of people. And like the antithesis to this was like in high school, I was also the band announcer, which meant like I was with all the weird band kids, but I was a band announcer. So I was like,
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, I was adjacent, right? So I was adjacent.
You were adjacent, adjacent.
I was adjacent to the weirdness of band. I was band adjacent, which meant I got to go to, the local theme park for the parades.
Wear the uniform.
I didn't have a uniform.
No?
No. I would just be the one, ladies and gentlemen, now announcing your marching band. I was that guy. So I'd show up at the games, I'd get free tickets, free entrance to the tickets. I didn't have to go to any practices. I didn't have to perform, but I got to be up in the booth, seeing everything and just talking and like, electrifying the crowd. And so that wasn't an outlet for me to get weird. It was like I was associated with it, but I got to do all the fun, cool, sexy, stuff that people were like, wow, you sounded so great up there.
You have a really sexy announcer voice.
Thank you. Well, I speak for a living, right? So thank
sure.
gosh. But in theater, I was in it. I was just in it, and I was loving it. And, you meet people who are just like all sorts of personalities, all sorts of sexual orientations, all sorts of talent, just like the weirdest stuff. And it's like, you wear makeup and you do dances, and it's just like, it was like, I love this. This is fulfilling this whole other goofy, crazy, explorative, rebellious part of me that, wasn't coming out other places. So I think musical theater was probably like the beginning of that. And just like everyone has their own weirdness, and it was like celebrated, and if you had a certain weirdness, you'd be asked to have like a solo piece in the dance,
mm-hmm.
or get a line here or there, whatever it might have been. So that part, I think, was very, very fun for me. And it also allowed me to express, because you're on stage and you're bigger than yourself, you're playing a character. I think all of those aspects were maybe like where the weirdness started coming out. And the other thing is I'm a great dancer. And so like when we do choreography, all of the instructors would be like, look, see Jamin? See how he's moving his butt? Move your butt like Jamin. And I was also getting validation for being not like a perfect achiever, but just for moving authentically or dancing authentically, And so
for making beauty.
That just felt easeful and natural. So I was getting the same kind of validation, but it was for doing things that my mom was like not really proud of or wanted me to do. Mm-hmm. She didn't make me stop, but she'd always be like, you're just wasting your time.
Right.
And then she'd come to shows and see me, right? So it wasn't like she totally hated it, but she didn't want me to waste waste my time doing it.
But those were the things that you chose.
And I chose them. So I chose them. I got validated. I got to do stuff that was easeful and fun and expressive. And a lot of it was character-based, So I just got to explore different aspects of not being perfect Jamin all the time.
Do you remember a favorite character or role?
No, I don't think any one character.
I wanted him to sing something
my
from
God.
one of those musicals.
Nah.
Come on.
Oh, man. I'm still improving on my, my singing. Yeah.
I watched over and over again when I was a kid, Cabaret, The Sound of Music, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, The Pirate.
Yeah.
These odd, old musicals.
My first ever musical was Guys and Dolls. And I would just, oh my God, I would listen to that soundtrack like over and over again. I knew all the songs. I love that show, And I was like, in seventh grade. So I was just playing like, it was like 7 through 12 was the school. So I was, the very bottom. So I was just playing all the background roles, come into this scene as a gangster, come into this scene as a whatever. But I just loved it. Oh my God. Like that show, still to this day, I hear the music, I do get goosebumps.
He still
The
sings me
guy's
songs.
only doing it for some doll, some doll, some doll. The guy's only doing it for some doll.
Yeah, there you go. I still sing. I sing songs to Ari and even the boys. Like I Love You, a Bushel and a Peck, and it's like one of the songs we sing to the kids.
A bushel and a peck and a
hug around the neck,
hug around the neck.
And a
barrel and a heap, a barrel and a heap, and I'm talking in my sleep about you, about you. The cows and the chickens are going to the dickens,
but I love you.
You bet your pretty neck I do. Do 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 do. You got me to sing. That's so funny.
Cute.
Yeah.
So good. I think kids just love it when people sing to them. So I'm so glad that encourages people who ordinarily would say, oh, I can't sing, I don't sing. But like they're a kid. Like they want you to sing,
You want your kids to listen to you, try singing what you want them to hear. It's magic. Take your dishes to the sink. Take your dishes to the sink. You can take your dishes to the sink.
right now.
Yeah. They just stop and look at you with this beautiful smile.
And then they do it.
And then they do it.
Wow, that is magic.
Hashtag parenting tip.
Ari, does Jamin have trouble taking compliments?
No, not really.
Because he just breezed right over
he has
mine.
trouble
was
not,
it?
I would say not letting it land fully without
like
passing on something else
permeating.
for you. Yeah, like passing it back.
What did you say?
I said, you have such a sexy announcer voice. And you said, well, thank goodness I do it for a living. Like, thank goodness I do.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah, no, I think that's because like, I don't know why, but there's this layer of like, I love the validation. I love the compliments and all that stuff, but I kind of just like take them in stride. I don't always like stop. And so when I get it really in a meaningful way, like if Ari says something, where, we've just navigated something and she's just like, I love you and I trust you and I'm 100% with you on this. Something like that, when it just gets that part of my heart, I mean, I just start crying. Like I just tear up in being seen, So I think it's around, I'm used to getting a lot of compliments for a certain number of things that are in this kind of world.
Like what? Surfacey things?
Yeah, speaking, like being really connected. I'm a great listener. I coach and support people all the time. Like I'm really there for them. I make time for people. So anything around like connection or helping, like I really show up as that. But the other aspects of just like, like I made a mistake and like it's okay and I'm still loved. Like those type of ones are the ones that I'm really getting better at, just fully receiving and like letting them permeate.
Well, it seems like they have impact because there's fear.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And, for instance, somebody's like, oh, you're so smart, Lila. I'm like, thanks very much. It doesn't necessarily get in there.
Right. Yeah.
But if somebody really genuinely says, I think you're so beautiful. And they really mean it. That like can touch me deeply.
Yeah.
Because for so many years I thought it was so ugly. You know? So that's interesting. That the compliments that we let sink deeper.
Yeah, totally.
Permeate.
And especially for me, just when they come from Ari, it's just like it just holds a whole different meaning because she's my life partner. You know, it's like it's amazing to be witness in so much depth and then also be, you know, appreciated. Yeah.
Are you very free with your compliments?
Except for around his hair, because I just don't notice his hair.
He wants you to notice his hair?
Jamin has this really magical taste for aesthetics, and like he just knows when a hair is out of place. And if you ever want a great photo shoot, you want Jamin there because he will know everything about your.
I do actually.
Oh, yeah. I'm
so you want
great
him
at,
to be like directing the photo shoot.
Yes.
He'll plan a pose and like which way your eyes should look and not your hair. So.
That's great because I always wish there were two of me so that I could do that for myself.
Yes.
Right.
Because I'm that person.
Yeah, and he's really into like creating a style. So his clothes all have a really great style about them. And he gets a joy out of shopping and gifts and things like that. And I just historically have not been that person. I'm like, cool, I can put my hair up in a ponytail. Or like maybe I'll shower today. And if I could wear sweatpants or yoga clothing all the time, I would be totally happy. So it's just a very different approach to life.
Yes, indeed. I specifically make sure that I do not wear yoga clothing all the time in my life. It's very important to me.
Well, I ended up having, this is a side tangent, but I ended up meeting this incredible woman a year and a half ago who used to be known as the fashion shaman.
Fashaman.
And Jennifer owns Wildflower Designs, and she did this thing, and I don't think she's currently doing it anymore, but she met with me and we spent like an hour together talking about my family of origin stories around fashion. And and like, you know, how did my mom dress? And like, who was my favorite superhero as a child? And like, what were some of my top 3 favorite things I've ever worn in my life? And then like, how do I feel about shopping or investing in clothing? And it was just really interesting. I had to draw pictures with different things, and she brought markers, and it was like in it. And then the next time we met, she came to my house and we went through all my clothing together. She went through my whole closet, which is like the size at that time, I could fit all of my clothes in a carry-on bag because that's how I've oriented my life as a nomad.
Wow.
And everything, like nothing wrinkles. Everything's pretty much the same color, maybe 2. And this is it's very functional for my life, but at the same time, it wasn't
pleasurable.
It was.
She loved the simplicity.
It was
of it.
great.
She just was like, how can I mean,
yeah. Like
So
then we started talking about like what she has all these different fashion archetype cards, which are amazing. And she'll do a whole archetype layout for you and design. And she'll tell you the story of your different archetypes and how they're showing up in your life through fashion.
And what needs to be brought out. Love this.
It's amazing.
This turns me on.
And she has fashion tarot cards, and she'll do a tarot reading for you. It's amazing.
Yes. Is she here?
She's here in Bali. She's over in Canggu. But it was just really fascinating to see all the different things. And when I got my report back and she walked me through it, and she's like, I see this archetype really wanting to come out. And she's like, you're a sex positive relationship expert. Like, and you had this incredibly sexy side that kind of got put to the side when you became a mom. And she's still there and alive. Like, how can we bring her out? And you have this love of being on stage and influencing people, and yet you also are at home on the floor with your kids and you're a dancer. So what do you need? How can you balance that? And she came up with this beautiful proposal, and then we spent a half day shopping at all these different stores. She took me on a half-day tour of different stores she had picked out to fit these different archetypes, and she created this whole wardrobe for me that allowed me to have the beautiful flowy elegance, bring out some of the like really sexy colors, like deep reds. And
I saw you wearing a deep blue, like a midnight blue with an off the shoulder the other day. But it was easy,
and everything was comfortable. everything could be washed easily, so I could be on the floor with my kids. But if I was called and said, hey, can you jump on stage and do a presentation right now? I could hop on. Like, I could just walk up and do it, and I wouldn't have to change my clothing. I was already in my natural, comfortable state, but I looked elegant, which was amazing. I'm like, you did all the things.
Yes.
And she knew that me not having a big wardrobe was important to me. And so everything could be mixed and matched. And it was just.
So she made you your own capsule collection.
Yes. And it was just so beautiful and such a cool experience that I felt like I could authentically be fashionable.
Yes.
So that was really, really neat experience. Yeah.
Sexy, dancy, flowy mama.
Yeah.
On the floor.
Who can also take all those clothes off and still be sexy underneath and ready to go. Like, right? It's like, all the elements are there.
One of the interesting things with Ari and I is she's the eldest of 4 and I'm the youngest of 3. So I was very much like the prince. I was very babied. I grew up with 2 sisters, my mom, and 2 grandmas in the house. So a lot of women. So I have a very strong feminine side, especially when it comes to aesthetics.
I can feel it too.
And she's much more of like, let's get this thing done. Like, what's really...
I raised my 3 younger
her
siblings.
favorite store is REI, right?
Oh my God, I love REI.
I know.
If I could do all my shopping on Amazon.com and REI, I would be so happy.
Yeah. And so
I know.
So she's had much more of this masculine style or approach to style and function. And so when we got together and through parenting, it actually became this beautiful invitation for me to step more into my masculine and kind of like finally caretaking somebody else instead of always being caretaken of, with 2 sisters and 2 grandmas and a mom, always doing everything for me. And then for her to really relax into her feminine,
which was so hard.
Hard.
Wow,
and now I just see her, and it's like the process and journey of motherhood, and even her stepping into this the fashion shaman experience was just like, wow, I just see really like bringing in that feminine quality, and so it's cool because we both have masculine and feminine aspects, and we can play with them a lot.
That is what I would hope for it to be, right? A dance. And with invitation and play and a watery quality. Yeah,
you have to go up at what time?
If I had 4 at 10, that'd be good.
Okay, we got a 15.
Okay, so you'll do your origin story.
Like right now?
Yeah. So what is the origin story of Ari Cardos, relationship coach, author of Relationship Agreements, mother of 2, wife, world traveler, nomad?
Yeah, I feel like I could speak for like 3 hours about that story. So
I know, that's why we usually record for a really long time.
Short, here we go. So I was born and raised in Michigan, and similar to Jamin's upbringing, I had a very religious family.
What kind?
Christianity. And mostly,
What kind?
my father was raised Polish Roman Catholic, and my mother was raised Swedish Lutheran. My grandparents had immigrated over right around World War II. When my parents met, they met early on, like in high school, but my dad dated my mom's best friend for a long time and almost married her and then didn't, and then realized how madly in love he was with my mom, and they ended up getting married. But it was a total renegade wedding. Like, the Catholics and Lutherans were not supposed to marry. So I had to find a renegade priest who would do it.
Ooh.
So they were rebellious, and they did it. And then they ended up having 4 children, and I'm the eldest of those. Let's see.
Do they still know this priest?
I don't think so. They moved a lot. My family is pretty nomadic in the U.S., in the Midwest specifically. We moved a lot because my dad has historically run hospitals. He's been a CEO of multiple hospitals and a lawyer, and so we'd move wherever the new opportunity was for them. My mom's a substance abuse counselor and a nurse, and so there was a lot of interesting dynamics around business and caretaking, a lot of different, like very masculine from my father and very, very feminine, nurturing from my mom. My mom was mostly stay-at-home when I was maybe 6 years old and on, and my dad wasn't home a lot. So my mom and I pretty much raised all of my siblings.
Why wasn't he home?
Because he was running hospitals.
Oh,
he was a very successful businessman.
Did that mean that you didn't really get to land in any school, in any social circle or activity for a long time?
Yeah, for a long time. And we'd move often. And then I remember when I was in 4th grade, we had landed in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And sometime around junior high or high school, or right before I think junior high, we had gotten another job offer to move. And I just said, I'm not going. Like, I'm staying here. You go ahead. I finally, for the first time, have friends. Like, I'm not going anywhere.
How old were you?
This must have been around 7th grade, at the end of 7th grade, beginning of 8th grade, I think.
13.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So we got to stay. My parents decided, okay, let's do a career switch. And so my dad got a job as a professor at the local university. And then later my mom would get a job at the same university, and they still teach there today. And they love it.
Whoa, you changed the course of their lives by putting your foot down.
Yeah. Yeah, in many ways.
I was wondering if you became an emancipated minor at 13, if that was possible. Because I could absolutely see it. I could imagine it in your story.
Possible. But around, I think, 5th grade or so, at some point, at this point, I've been raised both Catholic and Lutheran, and we would just switch churches every week. And I went to a private Catholic school for most of I think all of my grade school.
How connected did you feel to either of those strands of religion?
Not very. I mean, I knew how to do all the things. I can pray in Polish because my grandparents are Polish, and it just wasn't super connected. And then one day, we live in Michigan, so it snows a lot, and we had this huge snowstorm, and I have set out in the middle, it just finished snowing. I set out with my shovel to be the Good Samaritan and shovel everyone's driveways. And I ended up wandering through this field and coming up to a giant parking lot of a giant church that we'd never been to because it's not Catholic or Lutheran. It's maybe 4 blocks from my house, so it's not that far away. And there was a school bus sitting in the back, and the door had blown open. And I remember the whole bus just being filled with snow. And I was like, this snow is going to ruin this entire school bus. I need to clean it out. So I spent an hour shoveling snow out of this school bus. And then I felt like I should tell someone in this building in case they were worried that I was in their school bus. So I walked into this church, and it was just like, hey, I just want to let you know your school bus was full of snow, and now it's not. I'm going to find my way home now. And they looked at me so confused, and they were like, thank you. That was really sweet. And then I left. Well, fast forward a couple months later, and I also grew up in theater. Pretty much, I've been dancing since I was 3. And then I joined a children's musical theater performance troupe in 4th grade. Mm-hmm. And I was doing professional mime work. And it turned out the family that ran our dance studio were Christians, and we were hired to go perform at a local vacation Bible school. They did one of those epic vacation Bible schools that you get to see in movies and stuff, where everybody dresses up and there's a huge theme, and they have scripts and they practice forever, and they bring in goats and whatever else they need, right?
Right.
So it was a circus theme that year, and so they brought the mimes in. So I got to perform in this incredible setting and see there were probably 500 kids in attendance, and just see what a church could be in a different way for younger people, which I didn't have that experience growing up with the Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church. And there are churches that do that.
But you didn't get that youth group experience.
I didn't get that youth group. And so it totally shifted. And I went home, I made another declaration. I'm like, I'm changing churches. I'm going to this church now. I was like, wait, what? So they're like, well, you can't just go. We have to go check it out and make sure you're not, on the wrong path. And it was an evangelical Presbyterian community church. And they ended up falling in love with it. And after doing lots of research, and along the way, I'm in it. I was baptized in my life, I think 5 times now, 5 or 6 times.
Wow.
Yeah. You can never be clean enough.
Does that mean you're a dirty girl?
I probably need another baptism soon. So I chose to get baptized into this church on my own, and then later my family got baptized, and I was baptized Catholic, and I was baptized Lutheran, and I'd been in the full immersion baptism, and all the things.
You know this John Waters quote? I'm so glad I was born Catholic because sex for me will always be dirty.
That's good. anyways, I was raised very conservative Christian for a long time, also doing theater and loving it. Also the high achiever, best at everything, president of every school club,
Good
all the
girl.
things. A total good girl.
We're the same person in different people's bodies.
Yes. Yeah. I also grew up in the Midwest. So.
Does it really feel that way?
When we
When
first
we met,
we were like, oh my God, you were exactly the same person as me. This
Like,
is
let's
so
go
weird.
live life together because we want to live it exactly the same way.
Yeah.
When we met, she's the only person woman I've met that had been to more countries than I had been to. I'd been to 47. She'd been to 48.
Yep. And then we both grew up in the Midwest and conservative religious families. We both were the high achievers. We graduated with all the accolades. We finished school early. We went to business school and we were some of the youngest.
We went to the same year.
Went to the same year for business
and
school.
she was younger than me by 6 months. So we were the youngest in our entire class. Mm-hmm. We went to the same conferences and didn't know that each other was there.
Same festivals.
Same festivals that we went to, like Burning Man. And then we even got corporate jobs. In the same year we graduated, we got corporate jobs. And we left those corporate jobs to help people through our coaching, speaking, and books. And we've traveled the world. I mean, everything about our lives is like extremely parallel.
At some point, there's a disillusionment or there's a reckoning or there's something, right? At some point of the perfect good girl, good boy,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Well, now it's just like we're just perfect mirrors for each other, which is really what I believe relationships are, is that your partner can show you a mirror to the parts of yourself that need healing when they're ready. And together with the relationship tools that Aries taught me, we're able to navigate those pieces and let go of that good boy, good girl, validation seeking behavior, and then do all the work on like true love and unconditional love and loving unconditionally. I mean, there's just so many layers that I personally have to like undo around how I was raised. And Aries is like the perfect antithesis to doing that.
No, thanks,
and,
babe.
and like just doing it in the most loving way. It's like, cool, yeah, that's great, and yeah, super supportive. So anyways, back to your story.
Back to my story.
What did you learn about sex in your family?
Yeah. So my mom was my sex educator for our private Catholic school.
Oh.
Yeah. And she was actually pretty liberal and hippie around a lot of things around sexuality. She caught me masturbating for the first time when I was like 5. I remember her walking in and just looking at me, and there was this like understanding what was going on, and she just gave a small smile and turned and walked away and shut the door, so I had privacy. So there was already like this, like, what you're doing isn't shameful or wrong, and that
Just
felt
private.
really good. Yeah, just private. And then
I've never heard of a Catholic school that had sex ed. This is the first time of hearing of that.
yeah, but
it's
I
amazing.
mean, a lot of them do, but they are teaching abstinence.
Oh, well.
So
I'm not including that as sex
Yeah.
education.
but they call it sex ed.
Yeah.
And they don't teach you like how to use a condom because you're not going to need a condom, right? And so, right. And so I remember how my mother opened the class. She had passed out these cups of water that are like half full, and she's like, okay, now everybody spit into them, and it's all girls. And she's like, okay, spit into it. Okay, now I want you to pass this to somebody else. She's like, if you were to drink this is what making out would be like. And that's all I remember from class. That's all I remember. Now I'm like more like terrified of making out. We did have some really beautiful conversations.
This is horrible.
We had some beautiful conversations about how our bodies work and how God designs us like a puzzle piece. And there's like one piece that will fit so perfectly with our bodies. And later on, I remember reflecting on this after I had multiple partners and thinking, wow, I'm like the universal puzzle piece. I fit with everybody.
Whoa. You're like O blood, the universal donor.
So that was really amusing. And then there was this ongoing struggle for me, probably starting 10 or 11 years old, where I started developing a lot of hormones and a lot of desire for sex and intimacy, mostly for sex. If you look at the erotic blueprint options,
You're
you look at
sexual?
Jazz, I've been historically very sexual or sexual kinky. I'm pretty much driven in that direction for a long time. And it only in the past several months, I think, has shifted to more of a sensual undertone coming in, which is cool. But anyways, imagine I'm like a young teenager, very sexually driven and also very religious. At this point, like now I move into my high school years and I'm helping run the worship band at our church, and I am a leader in our youth group, and like all the model stuff that you're supposed to be doing. But I'm secretly having all these crazy desires to like know what it's like to have a guy's tongue down my throat, or to like see what a penis would look like, right? And this wasn't okay. So I had my own outlet where I'd always date the bad boy, and it would kind of be like on the down low. And
how did you reconcile it internally?
It just, like, no one ever really gave me a lot of crap about it. It was just sort of like, oh, are you sure you don't want to be dating a good Christian man? And there was still lots of, I'm going to save him.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I reconciled it. I was somehow going to save him for Jesus. And so that was really, and I didn't, it took me till I was maybe 18, maybe even 19 before I chose to have my sexual debut in the bigger realm. But until then, there's a lot of loopholes in Christianity that aren't specifically addressed in the Bible, like anal or like receiving oral. And the way that I interpreted the Bible and my youth group's message to me was, number one, my youth group leader would not talk to me about sex because he was a man. And all the women would only talk about becoming good wives and about intimacy and cuddling and things like that. And they didn't want to talk about sex. So I felt very alone. I felt like a lot of masculine drive, but there was no outlet for me as a woman in the church who felt sexual.
Did you talk to any peers?
Oh, I talked to a women's youth group about it, but no one could understand or relate. Everyone was like, I just want to cuddle with him. Wouldn't it be great if I was his girlfriend? And I'm like, wouldn't it be great if I could stick his cock in my mouth?
Right.
What? We don't talk about that.
Did you find any porn?
No, did not. So at this point, I am...
So you're really isolated, actually.
I'm really isolated. And
in your sexual desires.
Yeah, I have the desires. And I find this amazing outlet through my partner, my first, like, real partner who I connected with sexually. And he was just so sweet. I think we dated for a year, and he would go down on me regularly, and I would have these amazing orgasms, and I felt like somehow not sinful. I felt like okay to receive because I wasn't doing anything. I just had to lay there and receive. But I never saw his penis. I never touched it. Like, he stayed with his clothes on for the full year. And I think it was...
He's fully clothed going down on you?
Sometimes he'd get down to, like, his pants. Like, that's as far as I would let him go. And finally, one day, he's like, will you at least, like, you don't have to look at it. Will you just touch it? And I'm like, no.
Oh, wow. I love this double standard going the other way.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I love oral to this day. And still, I'm like, oh, yeah. Like, yeah. Eventually, we got to the point where we had intercourse, and it had lots of exploration, and it was wonderful, and it was like a beautiful, beautiful connection. And through him, I learned a lot about saying no. Like, I would just go to his house to relax and do nothing, whereas the rest of my life was constantly pleasing people, constantly saying yes, getting migraines all the time and not knowing why I was getting them, and just being overwhelmed and stressed. And there I could relax and say no to all the things I didn't want to do and say yes to just receiving pleasure. So that was all through high school. Ran off I backpacked through Europe right after that. Ended up deciding to start my adult life and figure out. I went to undergrad right after traveling through Europe. And then I studied sexual psychology in undergrad. And then I wanted to have a fun summer before figuring out which grad school I would go to. So I became a manager at a youth hostel in Boston. And youth hostels are like all-you-can-eat buffets for sexuality. So I got to try everything I was hungry for.
What did you try?
Everything.
What? What's everything?
I mean, anything from, I like to call it the Puerto Rican massage. For my birthday, I remember somebody saying, have you ever had a Puerto Rican massage? And mind you, I'm surrounded by these beautiful Puerto Rican musicians who attend Berkeley School of Music. I'm like, what is that? And at this point, I had a little bit of alcohol. And they're like, we'll show you. And it turned into, 5 beautiful men giving me a massage and leading to everything else. And it was great.
So a Puerto Rican massage is a gangbang?
pretty much. It was. And it was wonderful. It was a very happy birthday. And then my manager at the time used to be the assistant tour manager for New Kids on the Block. And he's a wild man, and I adore him so much. And he was kind of like papa to all the staff there who lived and worked at this place. And he was like, you always need to have condoms here. I mean, he always kept a huge supply of condoms. And do not sleep with anybody. Do not get involved with anybody who's here for more than 2 nights. Like those were like the house rules. Because people get attached, they'd stick around, there'd be drama, people wouldn't show up to work. Like, it was a very interesting set of rules he had developed, but we kept each other very safe. And we always, since we lived together, we had these rules.
Did you break the rules?
No, I felt really good in these places and under that umbrella. And it was so much fun. It was so much fun. I have crazy stories, but I could literally go on for hours about the youth hostel alone. After instead of a summer, I was invited to stay there and be a part of the management team. So I stayed for a couple of years, and then I'm like, I have to go be, quote unquote, an adult and grow up. And so I applied to a bunch of business schools and got accepted to the #1 international business school. And it's now formally called Thunderbird and is not around how it was before. But it was an amazing program, and I studied it in 5 countries for 2 years. And I spent a lot of time in India and just had an amazing set of experiences.
Sampled all the lovers and all the places.
In all the places, yep. And then through that, at that same time, I'm like, how am I going to pay for student loans? And I learned a lot about pro-domination, and I learned a lot about I met a lot of people in like the sex worker industries. I didn't get involved at that time with any of these things, but I learned a lot about the art of escorting I started to learn a little bit about what is kink and BDSM, but that wouldn't come till later on. But really learned a lot about sugar daddies at that time and a lot about pro-domination, and ended up studying, like getting to shadow pro-doms and getting paid to do so. It was amazing.
How? Paid by whom?
Paid by a sugar daddy who thought that I should be trained. And so while I was in school, I literally sat and read for about 3 hours a week books and things on what does a pro-dom do. And then I shadowed with some of the best pro-doms and just got to watch them in action. And I got paid to just watch.
Where was this?
This is in Arizona. And it was just mind-blowing to me. And I get to talk with these women and be like, why do you do this? What do you get out of it? Do you ever, and these women never took their clothes off. Right. And it was just watching the power they had and how like secure they were in themselves and how this gentleman responded. It was fascinating to me, especially from a psychological standpoint. I'm like, this is so interesting. Mm-hmm. And this is what he wants, and he's happy and she's happy and everybody's consenting. Like, where's all this stuff that I thought was so fucked up about this? And it wasn't as fucked up as I thought. So then I ended up getting a role at Amazon and leaving after business school and moving to Nevada and helped do operations there. I'm in a leadership development program.
And that sugar daddy relationship ended when you left Arizona.
Yep.
How did it end?
Oh, we're still friends. It's great. We're still friends. And then I battled with, am I a sex addict? And so I went to Christian counseling for a little while during my internship, and that was interesting. And during the same summer where I was receiving Christian counseling for sex addiction and actually attending Sexaholics Anonymous 12-step program, I met one of my most influential partners who was like, Sunshine, you are not a sex addict. You just enjoy sex. And you just enjoy being with multiple people, and that's okay. And there's something called polyamory that you should know about. And he gave me the book, The Ethical Slut. Changed my life. But then I still thought, this isn't really possible. It's nice that these authors have found that, but it doesn't exist in real life in my world. Ended up moving to Seattle shortly thereafter, and very quickly discovering the sex positive scene and learning all about polyamory and open relationships. And then
David has to make an exit, so we're just hearing him just quietly traipse away. See you tomorrow for part 2.
See you tomorrow.
Mwah. And then I have a long story about kink and BDSM and how I discovered that. but it was incredibly powerful. And it was all during when I was becoming a certified
Skip over the
coach.
incredibly powerful story and be like, blah, 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 incredibly powerful.
We don't have like 10 hours. Okay, let me back up. So now we're in Seattle.
Yeah.
I have already discovered polyamory and open relating and just been blown away by this and entered a really deep, meaningful partnership that I would be in for many, many years.
At this point, you think it's possible.
Now I'm thinking it's possible. Not only do I think it's possible, my partner's name is Adam, and Adam and I are leaders in the sex positive community. He was a contributing author to relationship agreements because those were all of our experiences. We spent years trying to understand how can we take all of our assumptions and expectations that we have for relationships and like wipe them out and start clean and say, if we could build our own ideal relationship, one that was agile and grew with us and allowed us as individuals to grow and our relationship to grow and be treated as separate entities, what would that look like? And it was through all of our fuck ups and all of our going to trainings and all of our experimenting with other partners that we really developed this and realized you don't have to have an open relationship to make this work. You can have monogamy too and have very clear expectations or agreements around like what you want instead of having expectations and judgments, and instead you can ask for what you want and you can change it, and it's not like you're in a legally binding contract, which a lot of people are often afraid of.
From all the people that I've talked to, the conclusion that I've come to is that polyamorous people in other kinds of consensually non-monogamous situations will make explicit what many monogamous people think are implicit, but then they are misunderstanding each other. And then it feels like betrayal because they never made these things explicit.
Right. And I remember having this moment where Adam and I had done so much work together. I mean, years of work together. And we were super proactive in having therapists and having coaches and really being like constantly learning together. And we had a therapist probably for 4 years, and she knew us so intimately. And one of the last times we saw her, I remember her saying, wait a minute, you both use the word support all the time, how you support one another, and he supports you, and you support him, and blah, blah, blah. She's like, I don't think I've ever paused to ask you, Adam, what does support mean to you?
Ooh, yeah.
Ari, what does support mean to you? And all of a sudden, it was like somebody had like blown our minds because we had thought we were saying the same thing and like really giving each other what they wanted for years. And it turns out that Adam was completely supporting me in all the ways he thought that I said I was supporting him. And vice versa.
What ways? How was it different?
Yeah, like support. So like, what is it? I ask this to everybody I work with now. Like, what does support mean to you? Like, how do you receive love? It's like going back to the love languages. Yeah. And for him, he was at that time very much more in his feminine. He really wanted a lot of emotional support, and he wanted things in ways that didn't come naturally to me that I have learned how to use more skillfully, especially with Jamin.
You mean nurturing kind of things?
Yeah. Like, for example, if Adam would get sick, I would get really pissy because I feel like for me and a lot of women I know, if we get sick, then we become like cats and we kind of like go hole ourselves off for a little bit, want to be alone and read and take our medicine and do our bubble baths. And then we come back healed as soon as we've taken care of ourselves. And then I feel like most men that I've known are like my 2-year-olds. And when they get sick, they just want mommy. And I'm the closest thing to mommy, when there's no one else around. And so they're like, now nurture me and love me and stay home from work and take care of me and make me my favorite soup. And I'm like, what the fuck? Go take care of yourself and leave me alone.
You're like, I do not want to mommy you.
I don't want to mommy you at all. But at the same time, I don't know why it was so harsh, right?
Yeah.
And so eventually we got to the point where he even bought a mug that said, please be nice to me, I'm sick, or something like that. I'm like, okay. So, yeah. And then for me, support meant financial and showing up in this way where he was going to be financially showing up at least 50% in our relationship. And that And even though we'd had these discussions, and we were saying the same word, we had very different meanings. So now when I talk with couples, I'm like, what does marriage mean to you? Because everybody has different definitions. What does it mean to be the breadwinner or to take care of the house? Or what gender roles do you hold? Or what, like, there are so many different concepts we come pre-programmed with from our parents and all these stories and what to expect. And they're usually vastly different.
Yes.
And so really breaking it down and saying, okay, well, what actually serves us? And let's focus on that. And what can we figure out later on and what needs to be solved now so that we can have some more harmony and actually have fun and playfulness in our relationship? Because it's been proven that if you stay together for a long time, you're going to have the same fights that come up over and over again. And those couples that can find the humor in it and can honor the person for just being different are the ones that are going to thrive.
Horizontal with Lila. Horizontal with Lila.
This episode was mixed and mastered by Irving Gadori, igrecording.com on the interwebs. My cover art was illustrated by Shauna Shea, whom you can find on 99 Designs. The remix of my original intro music was created by Kid Mental, an a cappella beatbox musician. Get a theme song of your very own by hiring him on Fiverr or becoming his patron on patreon.com/kidmental. Until next week, may you have the extra grace required to make it through this pandemic. And more than ever, may you have someone, many people, many people to love. May you have something to do, many things to do, and may you have something to look forward to. I think this one is especially important right now. I'm looking forward to learning how to strum my guitar. Literally. I've also started writing again. So if you want to receive my weekly-ish email missives, sign up on horizontalwithlila.com. The last 2 pieces have been titled, It's Coronageddon, Who's Gonna Save the Planet Now? And I Suppose I Live in Bali, (4) now. Thank you for listening all the way through to the end. Thank you for getting horizontal.